Hi everyone, welcome to this next video in our security training series. This is level 2, this is all about seed phrase protection. And before we delve into too much, I think it's worth taking a step back and looking at an introduction to security and what good security hygiene looks like. And then we'll move on to videos that are more focused on, okay, how can we protect our seed phrase a bit better, and also have a look at seed phrase triage. So it might be an instance where you haven't quite set something up in the best way possible you could have initially. So is there anything we can do to try and at least increase our security a little bit more and maybe rectify a few of those problems moving forward. All right, so let's jump in and have a quick look at the intro into security. And with all things, there's a cost of ownership. And I'm not talking about a dollar cost, although there sometimes can be, but cost of ownership in terms of everything we do in life has some level of cost associated to it. So it might be you buy a new iPad. There's a cost associated to setting up all your iCloud accounts, making sure the device is always up to date. So there's things that need to be done to this device to make it work and function correctly. And in security in general, that cost of ownership is a balance between convenience and security. So you can have something that's really easy to use and has a lower cost of ownership in terms of what you need to do to set it up, maintain and manage that setup. But the payoff for that convenience might be your security. So what we need to do is find a balance, because on the flip side to that, you could have the tightest security in the world, really locked down, but it's just impossible to use. It's not fun to use, and it becomes more of a headache and has a higher cost of ownership to implement than the usefulness of the solution. So the cost of the ownership in that instance has just been too high, and in a lot of cases when that happens, people just don't abide by the rules they've set up and start taking shortcuts. So all that security practices you've put in place, because they're inconvenient, you just end up not using it correctly or at all. So what we're about is trying to find the right balance between convenience and security. And if we can get that right to a level where the cost of ownership is not too high, but the convenience is at a usable level and the security is at a level you require, depending upon what you're trying to protect from, then I think that's the perfect balancing point. So how do we sort of determine how we set this balance point? Well, what we really need to do is understand what we're trying to protect ourselves against. And so let's just have a look at this spectrum. So this is a spectrum of, and I'll just bring up a little laser pointer. Just give me a second. So this is a spectrum of, okay, two things. So what's the threat we're protecting against and the risk level, and how much funds are we trying to protect, as opposed to on the very opposite scale, how much funds are we trying to protect here? So our funds are larger, so we probably need a little bit better security. And to what level of threat are we trying to protect? Okay, so how extreme does our security need to be? So let's have a look at a few of these items across the top of this scale and see what it is we're actually trying to protect against and make a real assessment on what we need to do. So I've got this one with an angel and a friendly face. That's really protecting against our own stupidity. So we're a friendly person in this realm, along this spectrum. Our threat is that we do something dumb, we lose our seeds, we lose a password, something like that. So it's not a malicious threat, but it's a threat we need to protect against to protect ourselves. So we're protecting ourselves from ourselves, essentially. Then we move further along this scale where, okay, the attack is a little bit more sinister now. So it could be prying eyes on the internet, hackers. It's something external to you and is a threat that you need to protect against as a minimum to stop either malicious people snooping or people inadvertently snooping that aren't you. I'll just back on this one as well. This may also be a trusted friend or relative as well. So you may want to give them a certain amount of trust, but your funds can still be at risk. So how do you protect against things like that as well? Okay, moving further along the field. So now we're talking about theft. So that's great. You've protected your seed. You've protected it from yourself. So you've written it down or something like that. Then you've got malicious intent, and then you've got theft. So you can see each time we move up this rung, there's another level of security that is required. This one here, so I've got a glove here, so either I'll call it a physical attack, or they call it the $5 wrench attack as well, as it's been known. So it's great you put all this security in place, but what happens if someone comes up with a $5 wrench and starts hitting you until you give them your seed phrase? Okay, so how do you protect against things like that? Then we move up to the next level. So a fire, something like that. You could do all these right things here, but you have a fire and it destroys all the hard work you've done and the backups you've made, simply because you didn't protect against that. And then, and this is that balance thing. So how far do you go? Okay, so we've protected against some pretty likely things here. Could potentially happen to anyone. Okay, what about a meteor hitting the Earth, or an asteroid coming and destroying the Earth? So what would you do to protect against that? And do you need to protect against that? And in the really extreme, what if there's an alien invasion? I'm being pretty silly here, but what I'm trying to point out is that you can go crazy on security, but you've got to really weigh up what it is you're trying to protect against. Okay, so let's have a look at these in detail now and just see what kind of things we can do to protect against some of these threats on this spectrum. Okay, so let's have a bit of a look at some of these threats and what we can do. And firstly, when we're protecting from ourselves, well, the obvious things that we will do is we'll lose our seed or our password or something like we mentioned. So how do you fix that? Well, that's pretty simple. We write it down somewhere. We store it somewhere that we can access, that should our software wallet die or our hardware wallet die, computer gets wiped, computer crashes, you've backed up that seed, which is the most basic thing you should be doing with your seed phrase, is backing that up so that it's protected against your own stupidity. Move along to the next phase. Okay, so we've got malicious actors that are potentially trying to access our computer or access our seeds. So what can we do about things like that? Well, that's good security on your computer. So firewalls on your internet routers, antivirus or things like that on your computer. The old phishing emails and things like that. So being aware of the malicious intent on some of those things that come into your system, and usually that is the highest percentage of attacks, not by people hacking through your router and getting into your machine. It's by the user sitting in front of the machine, clicking on something dumb because they're curious, that gives someone remote access. That's how most of these things happen. The old ransomware attacks and things like that. that's just user stupidity. So the computer systems these days they're getting pretty good. You've really got to know what you're doing to hack into them. You've got to be at an elite level. So 99% of the attacks aren't by people that are at that elite level. It's by people using software and tricks and phishing emails to gain remote access to a user's computer. So it's just being aware about things like that. The next thing is theft. Okay, well, we need to secure our seeds or any important information in a correct location. And that may be two things. So that may be physically, so seeds written down and physically stored in a safe, or we may have a virtual safe like password managers, encrypted vaults, things like that, where we can store things securely and safely so that there is less risk of them being stolen. This is probably more on the physical side though when we're dealing with seeds and things like that, and that's locking them away and getting them out of harm's way. The old $5 wrench attack, so you're literally getting beaten for information. How can we deal with things like that? Well, there's a few ways. So you can share seeds across multiple parties so that you physically can't, even if you give them your seed, it's no good to them. They'd have to track down the other 2 or 3 people to be able to bring the slices of the seed together to make it actually do anything. So that's one way. Putting passphrases over the top of seed phrases, so plausible deniability. So someone can say, I want your seed phrase, and you can give them that, and then they may try and log in and they can access and see you don't have any funds because you've protected your funds with a passphrase. So there's different layers we can put on top of this to obscure and protect our seed, so that if someone is forcing you to give away information, you only have to give them the passphrase that you choose to and divulge what it is that you want to. No one's going to know how many passphrases you have protecting your seed phrase. The next thing is, okay, from physical damage such as a fire or something like that, how do we protect against that? And that's about geographically separating important information. You've got to do that in the right way as well, because now you're trusting, and this is what it goes back to, you're trusting someone, so they may be friendly, but you're also trusting someone with information. So there's ways we can do that. We can share that information such that it's dispersed geographically, but no one, if anyone gets one piece of the puzzle, they can't be malicious. And it also spreads the risk around so that if your copy at home or wherever you've got it safely stored is lost or damaged, then there's another copy that can be located and used to restore things. And then so all this stuff, this is all pretty reasonable. We can do this, and we should do this when we get into asteroids or meteors hitting the Earth. What do? Well, you count on Elon Musk for something like that. Maybe we can store a copy on Mars or something like that in the future. And alien attack, well, that's not, we've got to go to the next level now, don't we? So this is my pop culture reference to the Babel fish and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy for all you nerds out there. But I guess what I'm demonstrating is, like, yes, you can protect against some of this stuff, maybe not the very end one, but it's just how far do you want to go and what's the expense dollar-wise and cost of ownership-wise. And once again, if you've only got a small amount of funds, then maybe you only need a small amount of protection. Or if it's a burner account on a soft wallet, and I'm going to run through burner accounts and things in later videos. So if it's something that doesn't have a lot of funds on it, well, then you don't need as higher security. Do you need to have all this extra protection and multiple seed phrases and split across slices and things like that? Do you need all that if it's a small amount of money? Okay, so that's what we've got to weigh up when we're looking at our security across the board. So bringing all this together, what it actually looks like is, once we evaluate what it is we're trying to protect against and building up our all the pieces of the puzzle, what we end up with, what looks like good security hygiene, or what good security hygiene should look like, is what I should say. So that's about strong passwords and password managers. So protecting against theft, essentially, or malicious intent where someone's trying to get your computer. Hardware devices, so getting things offline so that there is less risk of, if your computer does get compromised, there's less risk of damage. Once again, more firewalls and VPNs and antivirus, getting the right environment set up. It's your two-factor authentication and things like that. Offline seeds, so physical protection and making sure that any important seeds you have, they should never, ever touch a computer or an electronic device. Okay, if you're doing this right, your seeds should never, ever go online. Okay, so in that instance, well, we may need multiple copies of our seeds to make sure we don't lose them. Trusted backups, so places where you can store those multiple copies of seeds. And like I said, the biggest thing, social engineering. That is the killer for hacks and things like that. People losing funds is social engineering. And I mentioned like the phishing emails. In the crypto space, we see a lot of sites where they emulate a legitimate site and trick people into putting seed phrases online, or worse. This has happened on a couple of big projects where there's a seed generator online. So there's a new cryptocurrency, they're still feeling their way around what wallet to use. Go to a website that says, here, generate your seed online. And this happened to a lot of people where the seeds that were being generated on that website were all being recorded. 6 months down the track, everyone's loaded up all their wallets, there's all these funds sitting on their seeds, bang, one hit, all of it got taken. So you've got to be really on your game. By now, if you don't know you should never put your private key or your seed online, you need stop now. This is it. You never do that again. Okay, that's the #1 rule in this space: is seeds, private keys, never enter them anywhere online or on a website, or if anyone asks you for them, that's just the ultimate no. And then, being aware of what's going on, especially in Telegram groups, that is like a hunting ground for scammers. They're always trying to dupe noobs into sending them funds. It's quite rife on Telegram, which is a shame. All right, that's pretty much all I wanted to wrap up in this first video. It was just give you a good picture of what your security should look like and what you're trying to protect against, and just set the scene for, okay, now that we know the threats, what can we put in place to protect against those threats? I'll catch you all in the next video.